So let's talk about private membership associations. I'm going to go over a few things here. So I'm going to share with you exactly who I am, making important life choices, the hierarchy of laws, where birth service providers fall in the hierarchy of laws. And then I'm going to define exactly what a private membership association is and share types and examples of PMAs as well as their differences. I'm going to show you the constitutional validation of PMAs, how to transition your current situation to a PMA, the costs involved, what's included, and then if we have time, we'll do a question answer session. So if you have a question come up, make sure that you write it down. So if we don't have time, you're going to have access to my email address and you can just send it to me at that point. But first, I really want to thank WAPIO for giving me this opportunity. And I also want to extend a great big thank you to my study buddies, Kate, Emily, and Alex, because they gave me the chance yesterday to go through this presentation and fine tune some things. I really appreciate their support. Okay, I also would like for you to know that if you know anyone who chose to not attend this presentation because this doesn't apply in my country, please share with them information on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And what this is a milestone document in the history of human rights, okay? It was drafted by representatives with different legal and cultural backgrounds from all regions of the world. The declaration was proclaimed by the United Nations General Assembly in Paris on the 10th of December, 1948. Okay, and it's known as General Assembly Resolution 217A. And it is a common standard of achievements for all peoples and all nations. Okay, so their protections fall within that. Just lost my thought. Okay, so it sets out for the first time fundamental human rights to be universally protected, and it has been translated into over 500 languages. It's referred to as the UDHR and is widely recognized as having inspired and paved the way for the adoption of more than 70 human rights treaties applied today on a permanent basis as global and regional or at global and regional levels. Okay, also Canadians have the Canadian Charter of Rights. So I don't want people to think that just because you're not in the United States, this isn't going to apply to you. This absolutely may apply to you. So as WAPIO said, I'm Angie Taylor and I am a certified PMA advisor. Amber is here as my support person. So if there's any question that comes up that I can't answer, she will be able to answer, or we'll know who we can talk to. I've supported breastfeeding, pregnant, and birthing women since 2003. I also obtained 2 degrees in natural health in 2011, and I learned about PMAs in 2012. PMA stands for Private Membership Association, as we've already stated. And I have known that one day I was going to establish my own PMA, and I spent 10 years searching for the right person to support me in that endeavor. And during that time, I used someone else's PMA until they chose to dismantle it in 2020, which is one reason to have your own PMA and not be underneath somebody else's as an umbrella. So in 2021 is when my friend Amber Sensala started posting about PMAs and the fact that she helps other people establish their own PMAs. So I attended her webinar, very similar to this one, and I did a consultation with her and became one of the founding trustees of our family's PMA in 2022. And I'm now guiding others through that process. And as I shared earlier, September, we will have had our PMA for 18 months. So we all know that there's a right way and a wrong way to do things. We also all know that we can choose to remain ignorant, or we can choose to educate ourselves regarding the realities of the world in which we live. And the bottom line is that we all have important life choices to make. Some of those choices are more critical than others. And in business, one of the most important choices has to do with establishing a PMA for our business activities or projects, and most of us don't even know that. because nobody is telling us this. So let's dive in to some of the information that may be boring information that's very vital to understand. To understand a private membership association, we must first understand the hierarchy of laws in the United States of America. So the hierarchy of laws goes like this. First is scriptural authority, and this is true whether you're religious or not. This exists and benefits you, okay? And I'll explain more here in just a minute. We also have to remember, and I'm a Christian, and some Christians may not like this, the Bible is not the only source of scripture on the planet, okay? The second in the hierarchy is your state constitution, and yes, every state in the United States has one. The state constitutions were used in the creation of the third hierarchy, which is the Constitution of the United States of America, which was originally declared by our founding fathers and mothers of this nation. And then lastly, we have statutory law as written by the Bar Association. Now, a lot of people today are used to thinking that the federal government of the United States of America is the top dog in terms of the law, and that's actually incorrect. The laws set forth by our federal government are, in fact, not the supreme law of the land. Okay? I've run into a lot of people over the last 10 or 12 years that don't understand that. So if you go back to the true hierarchy of law, our founding fathers and mothers placed scriptural authority over all mankind. They knew they didn't want anyone else to experience what they had already experienced, and that scripture, which includes God's law and natural law, was older than all of them. So they started there, okay? So it's one of the many things that I've learned on my journey. This is just, a lot more educating for you guys to do, a lot more reading. In the book Original Intent, written by David Barton, he explains the original intent of our founding fathers and mothers. There were over 300 individuals who helped to create this country. It was not just old white men. There were women, there were men, there were all religions that were available in our nation at that time were represented. Atheists were there. So we had the whole gamut. There were recently released slaves that were involved. And they had very, very detailed conversations about what rights God had given to the human beings on the planet, and set forth what they believed would stand the test of time and would make sure that everybody knew what the rights were for every man, woman, and child that would be on this nation. So why are the laws set forth by the federal government not the supreme law of the land? And that comes down to the fact that the created cannot govern the creator, meaning it's the states that created the federal government. So the federal government cannot tell the states what to do. And the states, because they were created by us, they can't tell us what to do unless we give them those permissions. The federal government, as I just said, was created by the states. The states are the parent, so the federal government is the child, all right? One of the biggest things is that's set forth when you start studying the Constitution and what permissions and limited powers were given to the federal government by the states. Education is a great example. Our federal government was not given permission by the states to educate our children, okay? So it is totally within our rights to educate our own children. And our states have gotten into this kind of catch-22. There's things that they want to do and they don't have the funds to do it. And so they're dependent on funds from the federal government. Instead of turning to their creator, which is, hello, we the people, and asking for ideas, how do we fix this problem? They are instead turning to what they created. Okay, so this situation, we've got to flip everything back in the right direction. So why in the world do we need to know that? Why is that important? Well, as we look at it that way, then it's easier to just go, okay, so we've got to flip everything back. So where do we fall as midwives? Where do we fall in this hierarchy? That was one of my questions. So as someone who supports women who are pregnant, giving birth, in their postpartum period or breastfeeding, you may be wondering where we are in this hierarchy of laws. Well, we the people created you, or rather the need or want of what you offer. So because we the people are the creator, only we the people can grant you specific and limited rights and privileges. Therefore, the state has no power to intercede unless we the people add that to their specific and limited rights and privileges. And to my knowledge, the women we serve have not been afforded the opportunity to be involved in the creation of any state legislation pertaining to what we do. Not only that, there are specific constitutional amendments that protect your right to earn a living and that prevent the state from tying your hands. So let's shift a little bit and talk about public versus private domain. And a properly formatted private membership association is where you conduct business in private, meaning without government interference. Statutory law is what gives the government authority to rule over the public domain. So the public domain means you're out in the open, in the public. Anybody can hire you. It's for public accommodation. And incorporating means being a creature of the state and thus subject to public jurisdiction, including statutes and laws. So in a properly formatted PMA, you have the authority. The government has no access or authority inside your PMA. This is your castle and you are the queen. This is your private space, and the government only has authority in the public domain. I'm drilling that in. If you're wondering, why does she keep saying that? Because I want it to stick, okay? And what are some ways where you enter the public domain? Well, if you create a contract with the state, you enter the public domain. This would include signing on the dotted line to be a licensed midwife. It would also include having your business as an LLC. So when you establish a PMA, this is an unincorporated ministry or church, which is what I've done. You don't have to go that far. You claim additional protections based on scriptural authority. Now, some people don't know that midwives are mentioned in the Bible. As a matter of fact, in one account, a battlefield was completely cleared of the war that was happening so that 2 midwives could cross the battlefield safely. So once upon a time, midwives were the care providers for women and children, all women and children. And it's my personal opinion that it's time to recreate that. Let me go over exactly what is a PMA. What do they look like and all of that. So a PMA is formed by men and women who collectively stand and assert their rights to choose for themselves what products, services, or businesses they will use to live, thrive, and maintain their health, wealth in mind, body, family, and spirit. It removes the ability of local, state, and federal governments to interfere with or regulate your business. This includes removing the government's ability to demand that you have a license in order to conduct your private business. So think of a PMA as your private home. The business that is conducted among family members within the walls of your home is private business, unless you are obviously about to commit serious harm or substantial evil. So if you're getting together for a family reunion, but you're actually talking about murdering people, that is not protected under a PMA, okay? It's really important to keep that clear. And there's different types of PMAs and different levels of protection. So there is a standard PMA, a faith-based PMA, a ministry that places its faith in nature, and a ministry that places its faith in God. So with a standard PMA, I'm going to go through each one of these. And just so you know, most of the people that I work with do have some type of faith. And it's really important to understand that the legal definition of faith is a firmly and strongly held belief. So what do you have a firm and strong belief in? That is your faith. So there's some people that are a little leery. Well, I don't know. I don't read the scriptures. I don't go to church. The legal definition of faith is a firmly and strongly held belief. That's it. Okay, so your belief could be in God, the universe, Mother Nature, Earth. It could even be in the tree in your backyard. And just so that you know, the government does not get to determine if your faith is legitimate or not. That's also important. With faith-based PMAs, it does protect your private domain, and it protects your ability to invoke your religious liberties. That falls within your First Amendment rights. Now, both a standard and a faith-based PMA tend to be more singularly focused, meaning you're going to do just one thing in there. You're going to offer healthcare. You're going to offer wellness coaching. You're going to offer midwifery services, and that's it. Nothing else is going to be in there. But if you're a big dreamer like I am and you have multiple passions, then your life's purpose it becomes your ministry. So you're serving other people with all of the different things that you do. So within my PMA, it's not just what I do to serve expectant and birthing women and their families. It's also I'm a metabolic lifestyle coach. I help establish PMAs. So this is why we set up a ministry, and ours is a Faith in God ministry, so that we have that scriptural authority. Okay. With the scriptural authority, you get the benefit of additional case law to protect you, is what it is. So, and with having a ministry, if my husband decides to retire and start a business, we can pull that in under our PMA. We have 9 children. If they decide to have their own business, we can pull that in under our PMA, and they will benefit from those same protections. While there's still a plethora of case law that protects the private domain, with a ministry, you get to double up on the amount of case law that you can lean on. So there's multiple types or niches within the standard and faith-based PMAs. You have just your regular PMA. You have a PEA, which is a private educational association, and you have PHAs, which are private health associations. So you have a lot of variety. There's quite a bit that you can do. And as I said before, with the ministry, you can cover all of the options under one umbrella, if that's in alignment with your beliefs and your purpose. And that's a lot of people that I work with lean towards having a ministry. And you have to remember, our liberty still exists. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it, but our liberty still exists. There's just far too many that want us to believe that our liberty no longer exists. And that's just not true. And PMAs are more common than you may realize. They've been around for a really long time. I spoke a couple of weeks ago to a gentleman who's had his PMA since the 1970s. So I'm going to now share with you some examples of PMAs. So you have your faith-based associations, such as churches and ministries. Most churches have registered with the Secretary of State under 501c3 tax code, so the IRS recognizes them as tax exempt. However, doing this has meant a few things have happened. Number one, they became incorporated, so they're now a creature of the state. Number two, registering as a nonprofit charitable organization is not what a church is. That's not the definition of a church, which is very ironic, since churches by definition and by default already have a mandatory tax exception from regulations placed upon them, which is protected by a tax code called referred to as 508c1A, as well as 6033A3A. Okay, and these are in congruence with the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America, as well as the equivalent in each state's constitution. And what's really sad to me is that most churches don't even know that they've done that. Okay, they were led to believe that they had to in order to be a church, a legal church. We would prefer for them to be a lawful church. It's another one of those. There's a new vocabulary here when you guys switch. So legal means statutory, lawful is constitutional. Then there's PMAs that are health and wellness, fitness, chiropractor. This is where members need to sign a private membership agreement to participate. So if you belong to a gym, you signed a contract. And if you haven't signed that contract, if you're not paying your membership dues, you don't get to be in that gym. That's a private membership association. Then there are home-based education for parents who want to take full charge of their children's education. There's also restaurants. There are some restaurants where you walk through the door and you purchase something. They have on the menu that you're agreeing to be a member when you make any transaction here, and that a $1 membership fee will be included in your order. When you're operating out of a premises, so let's say you have your own building, you can simply put on the door, this is a private members only facility. Access is reserved for members only. You are agreeing to membership when you enter the premises, and a $1 membership fee is included in your order. Do you have to charge a membership fee? No, but you can. Now, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail where the different types of PMAs are concerned. So to give you a little bit more understanding of like a standard PMA, what they include: no government jurisdiction, so you're the queen of the castle. You have tax exempt if granted by the IRS. So this one you would have to involve a CPA. You would be in an EIN category of 501A, and this would just be for banking purposes. Anybody that works for you that you're giving an income to, they will be an independent contractor, and you would have them claim their income as cash on Schedule C. Then you have a private health association. So these function in private and not in public. So they have no obligation to and are immune from public laws and regulations, including local, state, and federal, including the FDA. Again, exception is obvious danger of harm and substantial evil. And the provider may have partnering entities, meaning they have one thing that's in the public and one thing in the private. So think of the medical doctors. Yes, as Wapio said, there are medical doctors with PMAs. So in order to maintain their license, that part has to be in the public. Okay, but all of their patient notes can be in the private. So nobody has access to them. Nobody can come in, even with a warrant, and request those records. Okay. Then you have the FBA, which is the faith-based association, and as well as a ministry or church. And they are in an EIN category of 508C1A, just for banking purposes. Anybody who works for them is an independent contractor who claims their income as cash through Schedule C. They have a mandatory tax exception. They don't refer to the people that work for them as employees. They are ministers and contractors. They may issue a tax deductible receipt to their donors. Okay. And their property can be tax-free, held in the name of trustees of their association and their successors, meaning you can pull your home and your cars off of the property tax rolls. No, I have not done that. Something working towards. Then you have the Private Education Association. Parents have a fundamental right to educate their children. We have a lot of case law backing us up in that endeavor. You do not have to follow state or homeschool regulations. And anybody who works with you to help in the educating of the children is, again, an independent contractor claiming income as cash on a Schedule C. The reason we say a Schedule C is because they don't have to itemize it. They don't have to say where it came from. It's just cash. The parents send a letter of intent to the school that says something along the lines of, "Here, we hereby relieve you of all responsibility for the education of our children." Okay, which is hereby assumed in full by, and your names is the parents. So the constitutional principles that validate PMAs is first, your First Amendment right. This guarantees freedom of speech and the right to assemble, such as when gathered for a birth in a private residence, however, may not apply in a public place like a hotel or a non-PMA birth center. Okay. The Fourth Amendment guarantees freedom of unreasonable searches and seizures. The Fifth Amendment gives you the right to due process, because due process must be part of any proceeding that denies life, liberty, or property. You also have the Ninth Amendment, guarantees certain inalienable rights to every man, woman, and child that have not been specifically enumerated in the previous 8 amendments. You have the 10th Amendment. So the 9th and the 10th are really important to understand. The 10th gives the powers, tells you that the powers that are not specifically delegated to the United States government by the US Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Meaning, if we the people haven't specifically given permission to the state, and the state has not specifically given permission to the federal government to do something, that right is retained by we the people. And then the 14th Amendment guarantees the right to associate with fellow members and to offer benefits and services that are outside of the jurisdiction, venue, and authority of the state and or federal authorities. Okay. If you have the book, Legal Guidelines for Unlicensed Practitioners, that Wapio showed earlier, it has the blue cover on it. I'm going to go through, starting on page 110, through to page 112, okay? And I'm going to read what it says there, starting with the second paragraph under the section Court Interpretation of the Ninth Amendment. It says this: in Griswold v. Connecticut, the Supreme Court held unconstitutional Connecticut laws that criminalize the use of or assistance in the use of birth control. Justice Douglas wrote that the statutes violated the right of marital privacy created by specific guarantees in the First, Third, Fourth, Fifth, and Ninth Amendments. This opinion by Justice Goldberg, joined by Chief Justice Warren and Justice Brennan, catapulted the Ninth Amendment into prominence. Just think about that, okay? So it violated the right of marital privacy. Are we somewhere in that marital privacy? Justice Goldberg wrote that the framers of the Constitution believed there are additional fundamental rights protected from governmental infringement which exist alongside those fundamental rights specifically mentioned in the first 8 amendments. The Ninth Amendment, in indicating that not all such liberties are specifically mentioned in the first 8 amendments, is surely relevant in showing the existence of other fundamental personal rights now protected from state as well as federal infringement. In sum, the Ninth Amendment simply lends strong support to the view that the liberty protected by the Fifth and 14th Amendments from infringement by the federal government or the states is not restricted to rights specifically mentioned in the first 8 amendments. Since the Griswold case, the Ninth Amendment has been cited more than 1,000 times. The most famous case was Roe v. Wade decision on abortion. The Ninth Amendment was used to support the idea of a right of privacy. Abortion was held to be a private matter. The government could not pass a law forbidding it, even though it might be murder of an innocent child. The early intent of the Ninth Amendment was to protect the states and the people from federal encroachment. The recent use of the Ninth Amendment has been to nullify state rights, especially in the area of morals and sexual matters. I want you to just sit with that for a minute before I go read from the next section. When I read this, I went, oh, okay, pregnancy, birth, postpartum, breastfeeding, all falls within that. And I've said for a really long time, my husband has heard me say it, I don't understand why midwives are not using Roe v. Wade as one of their arguments against licensure. So does the Ninth Amendment protect just any right? It's a great question. Raoul Berger, in the Cornell Law Review, sharply criticized Justice Goldberg for his interpretation of the Ninth Amendment in the Griswold case. Berger argued that if the Ninth Amendment can be used to protect some vague privacy right, what is to stop anyone from making up a right and then using the Ninth Amendment to protect it? Who is to say which rights will be protected? This is indeed a difficult question. However, one can argue this is precisely the challenge of the law, to evolve as society evolves. It cannot remain static any more than technology, language, or culture remain static. Judge Goldberg and the other justices made their decision by referring to other provisions of the Constitution to establish a framework or rationale for the unenumerated rights. Indeed, a right to privacy has a good constitutional foundation. It also dates back even further to John Locke's theory that each person is basically his own master. Judge Cooley described this right as the right to be let alone. The Ninth Amendment and unlicensed healers, it says, I was unable to find evidence the Supreme Court ever took up the question of whether state medical practice acts violate a right to privacy. The right to associate and contract freely, or the right to protect one's bodily property. Until there is a definitive case, it remains an open question. I believe there is clearly a privacy issue involved in the right to offer and receive one's choice of services in healthcare, education, psychology, and legal matters. Such services may be every bit as intimate and important as birth control or abortion. So, my opinion, pregnancy and birth falls within a woman's right to privacy. Her requesting the support of others falls within her right to associate and contract freely. And she has a right to protect her bodily property. Does she not?
Wow.
Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much what I said. Well, I went, oh, wow, okay. Why have we not been doing this all along?
Can you say those three again, please?
Sure. So, pregnancy and birth falls within a woman's right to privacy. Her requesting the support of others falls within her right to associate and contract freely. And she has the right to protect her bodily property. Very important. So you may be wondering, all right, so if I want to do this, what all does it entail? What do I have to do, essentially? There are certain things that you have to do, especially if you're an LLC. First thing is you got to make a list of all of the obligations that you have to parties within your practice. And this may include state authorities, suppliers, creditors, insurers, the DEA, state licensing agencies, state employment agencies, payers such as Medicaid, TRICARE, etc. Referring physicians, hospitals, landlords, accountants, attorneys, insurance carriers, and other parties. Okay. Then you have to notify each of the closure of your practice and the date of closure. You have to take all of your records. You're going to have to find out how long your records have to be maintained. How long do you have to hold on to these days or these things? It will be specified by your state. It will be specified by if you're paying any insurance companies, your bank. There's certain length of time you have to keep financial records. And then you just prepare to file and store them according to those. those stipulations. So that's with closing a practice. Then if you're closing a business, again, you have counting and tax reporting that you have to do. So you prepare your final balance sheet and file a final return and related documents with the IRS. You pay any owing taxes, you cancel your EIN and your business with the IRS. That's something I got to do this last tax time, and it brought me great joy. You notify your customers and all impacted parties. And then again, you finalize all of your paperwork. If you have employee taxes to pay, wages, deposits, pension plans, benefit plans, you report payments made to contract workers, and you settle all of your obligations. And then you do the same last step as with closing a practice. You have to know how and how long you need to store any records that you have. What are those legal requirements? And then to start a PMA, you choose the name of your PMA is the first thing. And you need to respect existing trademarks and names. So you can use Google, you can use TESS, which tells you what names have become a registered trademark to make sure. And a lot of times these days, it can be super simple. You can go out to any social media site and you can start typing in the names that you want. And if somebody already has it, you can't use that one. Okay. Do you want to do a thorough search? If you have a business or a practice and you want to use the same name, you have to make a little adjustment. So let's say that it's like private womb. Well, then it can become private womb ministry, or, you know, you can change it just a little bit. That's one of the things I can help you with. Then you have to choose your trustees. You need a chairperson and then one or more co-trustees to assist. Then once your founding documents have all been completed and signed, you would obtain an EIN number. So if you already have one, you have to let that one go. You need a completely different EIN number. And this is one of the things that I help walk you through this process. Okay. And this would be just for banking purposes. So if you're dealing with just cash, people are just paying you cash, this is a step that you may not need to do. Then you have to inform your past and future members that and I do recommend that a signed membership agreement be one of the things. I recently discovered here in my state that there are some midwives pretending to be potential clients and asking a bunch of questions. And so you don't know if the person who wants to do a consultation with you is really a pregnant person, because especially if she just wants to meet over text, you have no way of doing that. So what I have instituted is, even for a consultation, they have to sign my membership agreement. And everything is spelled out in there. And here in a minute, you'll have my website address and you can go take a look. Everything is locked behind a membership area. So when you arrive there, you see a page, and if you scroll down, my membership agreement is there, and you have to register for an account on my site, which is saying that you're a member of my PMA before you have any access to any of my offerings. So what does it cost? I know a lot of people ask this question and you're kind of curious at this point, right? So there's lots of resources out there who will happily create a PMA for you that is still statutory compliant. Okay, so it's legal, not lawful. And they'll charge you a lot of money. A lot of money. I've heard some people paying $10,000 or more. We don't do that, because our goal is to move as many people as possible from the public domain into the private domain. So for a ministry like what I have, that's where you can put a variety of different things under one PMA. It's $2,400. Okay, this is also more flexible. It's more mobile, covers you anywhere you go. You don't have to shut it down and reopen it. And then there is a faith-based PMA where you are focused on one thing: education, health, business, midwifery. You know, you're just doing that one thing. Nothing else is going to come into play there. That is $1,800. We attempt to deliver your final documents in 1 to 2 weeks. And a lot of times what slows us down is you. And it's not a bad thing. I don't want you to rush. I want you to take your time and coming up with a name and choosing your trustees, who's going to be the chairperson, how's this all going to be laid out. It just takes time. But once we have all that information, you should have your final paperwork in 1 to 2 weeks. Okay. So what does that all include? You get, and this is specific to me. Amber may not include all of these things, but this is specific to me. So I have a PMA Founders Guidebook, which is a PDF, but I've also turned it into a course on my website that walks you through getting started. Because again, there's a lot of things for you to unlearn. Think of this as unschooling for having your business. Okay. This Founders Guidebook will teach you how to be empowered, how to face challenges, how to find the answers to your questions, gives you lots of links and resources and so much more. So like I give you a template for founding trustee minutes. So when you have a meeting to talk about how things are going in your PMA, to make decisions, to close a business activity or to start a business activity, you have that information. And it's a great resource that you will have lifetime access to. There's also, like I said, a private members only community that you have immediate access to. Once I give you access to the Founders Guidebook, that gives you access to the PMA, the private members only community. And I'm setting up a directory listing. So anybody that I create the PMA documents for will be in that directory listing. Again, it's behind a login. Nobody can just go to my website and find it. That's not how it's going to work. Think of this as a great way to find someone who's already like-minded that you might want to debrief with or brainstorm with over different things. Then I also include a prenatal and birth charting package. It's editable, and that includes a prenatal record, a prenatal notes page, a birth record, and a birth notes. The prenatal record and the birth record, if you go into midwifery, Holistic Midwifery Volume 1, she has some pages where she has her forms there, and I just recreated them. Okay. But I also have in there a newborn exam, placenta examination form, as well as a weekly nutrition tracker. And again, I said it's editable. If you don't trust yourself to edit it, let me know, and I can send it to you in a PDF form. And if you want to add your logo, but you don't feel like you can edit it without making problems, then again, just chat with me. I may charge you like $5 to add the logo for you, but then you'll have this. It's been my favorite thing. I use a paper chart, by the way. I've never done anything online, and people always ask me, well, why? I mean, you can get one of these HIPAA compliant things. A paper chart is guaranteed to never be hacked. Okay. So I'm a techie person, so I don't trust a lot of things that are out there online. Anything can be hacked and tampered with. I also have an add-on, which is the creation and editing of your practice guidelines, contracts, intake, and consent forms. This is a add-on and is an additional $1,200. And you have to understand that I am not an attorney. I can only share with you the changes that I've made and why I made them after receiving counsel from a PMA founder who has a law enforcement background, and he actually helps people who have PMAs and they have legal stuff come up. He's very good at what he does. So I want you to know that there's a special offer here as well. So when you enroll, there's this course called How to Win in Court Without a Lawyer. It's an online course. When you enroll in that and you send me the receipt, I will apply $200 of that purchase toward the creation of your PMA. And this is a 1-year access to that course. Then it renews for $89. It does not renew automatically. He does send you an email to make sure that you still want access to it. For that, you just go to howtowinincourt.landbountifulministry.org, and that will take you to the enrollment page for that course. Why do I recommend that course? None of us wants to think about needing a lawyer. And yet all of us need to understand that we cannot just depend on a lawyer. They are, their first responsibility is to the Bar Association. Their second responsibility is to the court. Their third responsibility is to their client. So if anybody's going to get thrown under the bus, it's going to be the client. So this gives you the ability to know whether or not your attorney is working for you or the Bar Association in the court. Okay. And it also gives you the ability to help in your defense. Some people lose their case simply because they didn't know how to help in their own defense. The choice is now yours to make. Yes, life does confront and challenge us, and the right knowledge and the right action is what will carry us each through. So now is the time for you to decide, do you want to keep your business private and shielded or public and exposed? So I can help you get started with your founding documents. If you would like to work with someone like me who, as I said, I'm a certified PMA advisor. I have my mentor, Amber, here, who helps me make sure that I've done everything I need to do with your documents to create a strong foundation for you. Then, you know, let me know. Here's my email address, Angie@landbountifulministry.org. So, and I really feel like I'm just uniquely placed to support midwives, birth keepers, doulas, childbirth educators, anyone providing some type of birth service, just because I've been there. I've run the gamut from the Leche League leader to teaching Bradley method classes, being a birth doula, being a midwife. I have just seen so much and learned so much that I'm like, this is my safe space. Okay. So let's have some time for question and answers. And I've got 3 that I had from the top of my head that I wanted to cover first. And then if you guys have additional questions, and if we have time, we will go through that. Yeah. So the first question is, will establishing a PMA for my business activity keep me from being arrested? I know that's on everybody's mind. The sad answer is no. Establishing your own PMA will not keep you from being arrested. Now, this is also true when you have a state license and or certification from an approved organization. The only thing that can significantly lower your risk of being arrested is for you to reduce your own risk. For me, what that meant is I carry nothing that I do not have the right to carry. So for me, it is if it requires a prescription, I don't carry it. Okay. I choose to not induce or augment. They increase risk to mother and baby. So I do not do them. And I've had some women be very upset with me because they tried to talk me into it and I told them no. For this very reason. And in hindsight, after their baby was born, is when they said, thank you for not doing those things. Thank you for allowing me to wrap my brain around what it meant to really give birth. Or it was a thank you for getting me into the hands of the person and making sure that I was in a place where my baby and I would be safe. Okay. And the third thing is to use your practice guidelines, contracts, intake form, and consent forms to reduce your risk. The gentleman that I spoke with a couple of weeks ago is right now looking over all of my documents, my practice guidelines, my contracts, intake, consent forms, all of those things, and helping me to turn them into a template to use with everybody else that I help set up their PMA. Because we want to make sure you have a strong foundation. Okay. I want you to be able to hand your contract over to a DA if you get arrested and say, this is my contract, and have him read through it and say, oh, charges dropped. It is a possibility, but you have to know how to protect yourself. Another question, what if I do establish a PMA and I get arrested? Many of us know about the Nebraska Midwife. There's also the Amish farmer, Amos. Both had PMAs, both got arrested. Both made some mistakes because nobody gave them a warning of what to do. They didn't know. This is new foundation. It's been the ability for all of us to have this from the beginning of our nation. But we are all just now starting to go, oh, there's this different thing that we can do. So my counsel to you is this: if you establish a PMA, you find yourself getting arrested, you first remain calm. You second, claim all of your rights, known and unknown. Don't expect them to tell you all of your rights. So you claim all of your rights, known and unknown. And those include your right to a phone call, your right to remain silent, and your right to an attorney. And step 3 is do not attempt to explain to them that you function in the private domain, simply because they won't understand what you're talking about. Okay, so you want to wait until you've got someone on the phone helping you navigate what's happening.
Angie,
Okay.
can I touch on why they won't understand what you mean?
Yes.
When you say private. Okay. So
Please.
a lot of people, including myself, when I first got started with this like 5-6 years ago, thought private sector was the same as private domain. And unfortunately, they're not. If you're open for public accommodation, really, in my words, this is not legal, but in my words, what you have is a privately owned public business. And by being open to the public for public accommodation, you're under their jurisdiction. So when you say private domain, all they think is private sector, meaning they think you're still in their jurisdiction. So that's why we don't want to try to explain to them, because they simply won't understand. And they're just like doctors with medical freedom and properly informed consent. I am not one who is going to blame the messenger, the doctor, the law enforcement officer, whatever. Because when you don't know what you don't know, you don't realize you're missing anything. And so it's not their fault. We want to treat, be as respectful as we can and still create that, boundary. That, you're pleading the fifth, you're going to remain silent until you seek counsel, all of those things, so that you're retaining all of your rights.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, it's sad that this is where we are, but this is where we are, and we can help bring it to light. And I tell people when I talk about establishing PMAs for businesses, they're like, well, what does that mean? I'm like, think of it as a supply chain of PMAs. So we have a growing directory of different types of businesses that are all PMAs that we can access for ourselves and we can refer people to. So the third question that I get asked a lot is, what else can I do to prepare and protect myself? And so the things that I recommend is, number one, if you don't do anything else, enroll in the How to Win in Court Without a Lawyer online course. It is so important and it is so detailed, and it was put together by an attorney who has a really good record in court. And that's what you want. You want to learn from somebody who he's telling you how he does it. Okay. He's pulling back the curtain and telling you exactly how he does it. And then the second thing is to watch, listen to, and read anything from KrisAnne Hall. She runs the website, Liberty First Society. I would start with the movie, Non-Compliant Movie. And then the sequel to that is The Sheriff. Now, when I watch the Non-Compliant Movie at the end, watch it from all the way from the beginning. But when I was watching the part about the sheriff, I said to my husband, midwives are supposed to be the sheriff of birth, because your sheriff is not to blindly follow the law. Your sheriff is to protect and secure your rights. So in my opinion, what we do as we support women We are there to help them secure and protect their right. Okay. So you can go to libertyfirstsociety.com/non-compliant movie for that first one. It's an amazing movie. So those are the questions that I have. Wapio, I'm going to turn it back to you. I don't know if we have time for more questions. Again, if we don't,
Plenty of
okay.
time.
Okay. So
I have a question.
yes, ma'am.
Ready.
Go ahead.
Okay, I feel like myself and many of the women here who are gathered are looking to not have an emergent situation happen to them while they are giving child, care. All right. And so I thought that the premise of the PMA was that you were outside the jurisdiction of the legal system. Therefore, if the first thing that you have to do in any court case is to prove that the sheriff and the police and everyone has to prove they have jurisdiction over you. Mm-hmm. Am I correct with that so far?
Yes.
Okay. So so that has never been overturned from what I understand.
Correct. And it's brought out in that book, Legal Guidelines for Unlicensed Practitioners.
Yes, that's what he says, that you should jurisdiction.
Yes. No yep. If you find yourself in front of a judge, that's your first action, is that the court has to prove that they have jurisdiction to hear the case.
And if you have a tight PMA, they will not be able to prove it.
Exactly.
Okay, that's what I've been telling people is why it works, why it's valuable. And in the case of a few people, I agree with you that it's people don't know about the PMA. They don't know what you're talking about. Okay, mm-hmm. They think that's some club or something like that. And meanwhile, they can destroy your life. You know, while you're waiting for someone to figure out that you don't have jurisdiction. What I've seen in places is that if you are practicing midwifery without a license, your colleagues will turn you in because they don't understand that you have the right to do that. And they don't understand why they don't have the right to do that then, and mm-hmm. what makes you so special. And it all things get mixed up and feelings get hurt, mm-hmm. It gets personal and so on, things like that. Is there any guideline or guidance you would give to someone who's starting out a PMA in a community where there are midwives who went to school for a long time to get their license and will not be happy to have you in their midst? What do you think about anything about that?
I think the best thing is to have good communication skills so that you can share with them, that you can help dig them out of where they are and put them in the same place that you're in. That it doesn't mean that you're better than they are. It just means that you found information that hasn't yet come into their view. And so it can be in the first, when you're starting out with your PMA, it's really hard to explain what it is. So, but that's why you have Amber and me. It's okay to say, I know that you can do this too, because I did it and we do the same work. I can't explain to you all of the details, but I can give you the contact information of people who can. And sometimes that's all that we can do.
Right.
And yes, in the destruction of your lives, I spoke to the gentleman who ended up coming in and helping the Amish farmer. And he said people only know that he, quote unquote, lost. They don't know the other half of the story. And the other half of the story is because this gentleman came in and helped him, he fired one attorney, he got a second attorney who was actually beneficial. And the federal government was facing a substantial amount of money should any of the stuff that they confiscated have been just, ruined in some way because they didn't store it correctly, or because it passed its best by date or whatever. So he was given the opportunity to inspect everything that they had stored and to be able to say, this is ruined, this is not, and receive financial compensation for the damages. So unfortunately, our media is never going to tell you the flip side. They're just going to tell you the part that will keep you scared. So I don't want you to be scared. Amber and I want you to know that there's solid foundation here, and it will take some time to unlearn what you've learned and learn the truth about what's here. So does that answer your question, Wapio? Does that help?
It's helping. Okay. Here's another one. I've noticed that there are many direct care practitioners now in doctors. They call themselves DCPs. Is that the same thing? They only work with you who are in their association. You have to sign up,
Right.
a monthly fee, but there's no government involvement. There's nothing, no insurance either. Insurance doesn't work because
Right.
it's completely, is that this pretty much the same thing?
I think it's similar. I don't know if it's the exact same thing. But I do know that there's a growing number of physicians that are doing that because they can see more people. They can sit with you longer. They can better understand what you're doing. They've invested a lot of money to have their own diagnostic stuff, so they don't even have to send you anywhere. They keep their own pharmacy most of the time. So when they are feel the need to prescribe something, you leave with it. So it's similar. I just can't say for sure that it's an actual
Right. I was
PMA.
going to say the same. I haven't heard of that name specifically, but I do know, and I've worked with a few doctors too, as well as our mentor, who have done exactly that. But there are different kind of flavors. So a non-related example is Costco and Sam's Club are membership-based, organizations. Now they're not private membership, unincorporated, so they're a little bit different. They don't have quite the protections. They're statutory. So where that line is, because I don't know them specifically, I can't say, but they're much closer, if they're not the same thing, much closer to what we're doing here than the traditional private practice. Yes.
Another question, if I may. Can you lawfully call yourself a midwife if you have a PMA?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked this question. Okay. I asked this question of the gentleman I spoke to 2 weeks ago, and I'm not giving his name because I don't have permission to give his name, and I don't really want to flood him with a bunch of people because, quite frankly, he's already flooded. God sends him a lot of people. So I asked him that very question. And I said, so are we not supposed to use the word midwife? And he says, you can use the word midwife. And I said, okay, so how do we do that? You create your own definition of midwife. Just like in the licensure laws where they define what midwife is for them, within your PMA, you get to define what midwife is for you. And so that's one of the things that he and I are working on is a glossary of terms. And they're, so if there's a term that you don't use, like I don't use the word labor, I always refer to it as the birth experience or the birth sequence. And so you can have all of those in there so that your clients, as you're working with them, have a glossary of terms so that they know what you're talking about. And I was just like, oh, this is so brilliant. He's also helping to add to my contract wording along the lines of and it would be my name, or if it's your contract, it would be your name. And the only one who can define the words, terms, and phrases within this contract. That way you don't have somebody take your contract to an attorney wanting them to define what it means, because they will see that and they will say, you need to go back to her because she's the only one who can tell you what everything means.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. Yes.
And I want to add on that a little something. I don't know if that works for terms that are technically like copyrighted. So if you have a certain, I'm not going to show the brand, but a certain brand essential oil that's their trademarked name of their blend, and you're using that might be a little gray area. But these words like midwife, there's not a patent or a trademark on the word midwife. They can't claim that word, even though they'll try. Same thing with childcare, daycare. We work with a lot of people in those industries too. And for actually a while, we were advising, don't use the word childcare in your name because they're not going to understand, and it's going to be an uphill battle. use like learning center and some of these synonyms. And while I still, if you're one that's not confrontational, most of us aren't, or most of us are already burned out from the last 4 years, you know, maybe still use some of those synonyms to help alleviate some of the confusion, but they don't own these words. And that's why I love what he has shared with Angie, because that's kind of revolutionized what we're doing here, and gives a lot more freedom and breathing room, that like they don't get to define what these words are.
Right. Yeah, they're not the definitive authority. There's a online law dictionary called the Black's Law Dictionary, and the word a has how many definitions, Amber? Like 3 or 4. And so you can even sit in a court of law and have them just define every word in their documents, so that you understand what it is that they're talking about. It's these kinds of, you know, word games, if you will. Well, what do you mean when you use the word a?
Yeah, and someone not in PMA land here, but someone in court has actually successfully had a case dropped because they made the other party define the word is in every single instance they use that word, and it became so burdensome and so cumbersome. They're like, it's not worth the work, we're dropping the case. Basically, I'm summarizing, but yeah, so knowing semantics and knowing how they use semantics and kind of flipping it back around on them, that's like my favorite game.
Yeah, I just have one caveat with the Black Laws Library, or the Black Law Dictionary. Do not let your teenagers have access to it. They're already master arguers. They don't need to have, you know, be asking you, well, I don't know, Mom, what do you mean by a? Okay. So that's just my only caveat. I'm not letting my teenagers know. So
Okay.
Lapio, do you have any other questions?
Maybe, but I'll relinquish the floor to Katie.
Okay. Well, Martha had her hand up first.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
It's okay.
First of all, thank you. This is just an abundance of information. I really appreciate it. I wanted just 2 things. I'll try to go quick. So, because I had thought you couldn't use the word midwife in anything that was available to the public, like an Insta or webpage. And I think now you're saying, if I'm getting it, you can, because even though in the state of Wisconsin, they've claimed the word midwife, that's statutory law. So you still could, because the other laws are above that, or am I not getting that part right?
As a PMA, I'm not sure how well it would work if you did not have a PMA and you just define them on your own.
Oh, no, but if you had a PMA, I thought you couldn't use it even, just say hypothetically I had a PMA.
No, that
somebody in the public could look up my Insta that I couldn't use it there, for example. And you're saying that's not true.
To have like a disclaimer on your website,
okay,
to that of the contract, where it says, you know, I am the sole person who can define the words that I use. Something like that, or the one that you use, I'm summarizing it, but having those disclaimers in the footnote, or, you know, as a pop-up on the website, very, very good practice.
Okay.
Great.
Can you go over really quick, but you can't, or, I mean, you could do whatever you want, but I think what you were saying is you don't carry, for example, MISO or PIT because that's a setup to be
it requires a prescription, and so it opens the door for you to be charged with practicing medicine without a license.
Okay, even though I'm not under that regulation,
because it requires a prescription.
Because it requires a prescription. Okay.
Yeah, it requires that you make a diagnosis.
Okay.
And then prescribe that those things are the things to be used.
Okay. But you could carry homeopathy, herbs. What else? Could you carry like a Doppler? I mean, because that doesn't prescribe. I'm not even saying I'm planning to do these things. I'm just trying to get the idea.
Right. A private woman can go out and buy her own Doppler on Amazon.
Exactly. Yeah.
And this kind of comes down to like good practices versus best practices.
Right.
I mean, technically, if you can access a thing, technically, if you're willing and able to defend and assert your rights well enough, you could, access and carry anything or use anything. But it kind of comes down to what, risk mitigation.
Yes.
And that's kind of what Angie's is, becoming an expert on. And she surpasses me on this because this is her niche, that whole risk mitigation thing. I mean, I've done PMAs for people who sells CBD related products, we'll put it that way. Whereas in their state, it's still not allowed, even though it's constitutional that they can. But it really is about that risk mitigation and how much you're willing to fight that. So that's
right.
I want to kind of add that caveat that, this is one of those, it's the best practice to use what any consumer can access, to kind of minimize those risks.
Yeah. And that's why I say minimize your risk. And you're going to have women who think that induction is just part of the birthing process. And it's our responsibility to teach them, no, actually it isn't. It creates a great deal of harm. And increases their risk and the risk to their baby in some pretty big ways that they don't even realize.
I was thinking more post-birth. I don't want to get into it too much, but like,
yeah,
for if they really don't want to transfer and you have, again, I have no intention of even doing this. Probably not, but I just want to get this. I was thinking more post-birth. If the woman really doesn't want to transfer, you've done all the things. She's not literally bleeding out, but it looks like, okay, maybe thus and such. In the hospital, they're going to give her mice or pit. I was thinking more after birth, but the principle is probably the same.
Yeah. Yeah. And someone just asked the question, can you define induce and augment? Yes, in your PMA glossary, you can define what those mean to you. Absolutely.
I know Katie's waiting. I just want to say one sentence. If it were me, I would not carry clinical tools to minimize risk.
Same. Yeah, I'm on the same page as Wakio. Okay, Katie.
There it is. Hi. Oh my gosh, this has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for putting this all together. Like, this collaboration is just beautiful. Do this every time, Wakio. This is great. Everybody I feel like needs to know this. So I have a question about being, and I'm not even really exactly sure what the term is, being not a citizen, a naturalized person. Getting rid of your social security number. My husband knows all of this stuff way more than I do. He's been researching it for years. And we've recently found somebody that can like do that whole process for you, get you the paperwork, file it, all of that, which has eliminated a lot of the studying for me. So I've like since forgotten all the terms. But how would somebody do that with a PMA? Would you set that up with your trust that you establish as your person operating in the government?
That's referred to as, is that status correction, Amber?
Yeah, it's a form of status correction. Yes. I can touch on that one if you like.
Yes.
So with status correction, I've worked with quite a few people who, and I use that as like a summary category because there's all different flavors. And if I use the wrong name, some people get offended. So I just kind of use a summary term status correction to cover all of it. And for those who aren't familiar with that, Katie did a pretty good job explaining you're basically, for lack of a better word, kind of denouncing your U.S. citizenship subject to the government per the 14th Amendment. And it's one of those to each their own. Personally, because of my custody situation, I'm not going to touch that at least till my kid is 18. So I'm not jeopardizing anything. So, but, just to give a super summary on super basic summary. So yes, you can still do a PMA even with having corrected your status. I have not worked with anyone putting it in their trust or opening it through their trust. I have worked with them just using the name that they've provided for me, the personal name. What it would look like instead of getting an EIN through the typical process we've been doing with the 508C1A tax code is you would, if you're going to open a bank account, you would want to use or get a foreign EIN one of our affiliates, he's working with a lot of people who are doing this kind of stuff so that if they get an EIN, they don't have to associate their social security number with it, whether or not they've, done a status correction. So that's something that I'm currently working on learning. I had hoped to learn it by the end of the summer, the foreign EIN. But as a mom PMA advisor, life happens. So yes, you can still absolutely do it. We just use whatever names that you provide us as names for the trustees. And because you're not filing this with any entity, once it's yours and you sign them into existence, they're yours and it's done. You just keep your documents. So yeah, good question.
Well, I just had this thought.
Any other? Uh-huh.
I mean, let's say you were arrested and you went to, you wanted to get a hearing as quick as possible so it could be thrown out. Could you also could you also bring a mother with you who says, according to the 9th Amendment, this whole case is infringing on my privacy? What do you think?
Yes, there's actually been some people who will, once they know who the judge is, they'll call the judge and say, this is a private matter, and explain why it's a private matter. And then the judge drops everything. It's just a matter of knowing that you have these options. And most of us don't know that we have this ability to do this. We've been taught to be afraid of the court system. Okay, but that's where justice is supposed to happen. And so if we're afraid of the court system, that's why justice is not really happening there. Because like I said, we don't know how to defend ourselves. We don't know how to go in there with our head held high, walking confidently and speaking, saying, this is what's going on here and you don't have jurisdiction and this is why. And unfortunately, there's a certain number of attorneys that when you talk jurisdiction, they don't understand, but the judge is going to understand.
Yes. Okay. So
sometimes it's getting to the right person who is going to understand.
Yeah. And that's where, whether or not you enter what I lovingly call PMA land, whatever you do, it's really why we advocate that How to Win in Court course, because he teaches you, in my words, he takes the court system from being like the big scary monster under the bed to, yes, still being intimidating, but you know what they're doing in the process they're using so that you can know it too, and then use that basically against them. The founder of that course, he explains it really nicely that the system itself is really not that bad. Like the court rules of evidence and procedure really are actually pretty good. It's because the players in that system know that we don't know our rights and what the rules are. They run amok, they get to cheat and do these things. So once we know those rules too, they have to play by the rules, which often means things getting dismissed because there's lack of evidence, lack of jurisdiction, things like that. So whatever you do, highly recommend that course because it'll teach you exactly what you're talking about, how to make, flip it on the challenger to prove what they're trying to say. Instead of you having to defend it, you just keep flipping it back. Okay, where's your evidence? Oh, that's not admissible. Where's your evidence? So
brilliant.
Right.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Well, and I know I have met a number of midwives and birth keepers who have chosen to not have a contract because they feel that protects them, and it does not protect you. You need to have things in writing. With statements like check this box or initial this box, stating that you understand and agree to the following statements. And so when you have those things and the wife and husband have made their signatures on there, that stands up for you in a court of law. We have to be very clear on all of that stuff. We have to include in our contract the fact that death is an option. Death might happen for mother or baby. We need to stop avoiding it. It is unfortunately part of the process for some families. It doesn't mean that anybody did anything wrong. You can do everything right and still have the worst outcome. There are times when things just happen. And so we have to make that clear. Our moms and their families need to understand this is an actual risk. And it's always been a risk. That's why we do X, Y, Z. And that's how I put it to the couples that I serve. This is the risk. Even after your baby is born successfully, they still have a window of time to choose whether or not they're going to stay.
Mhm.
And we can't force them to stay.
Yep.
So we have to have, and I explained to them, this is why we want to make sure that the blood volume expansion happens and that you have that foundation in nutrition, and we're not doing these things and we are doing these things.
Yep.
Because they need to understand, and they want to understand why. Amber?
I just wanted to pop in and say I had to get going. If there's any questions that you need help with, we can just, you know, go through email or something. But love you guys. Thank you so much for letting me be a guest here today, and talk to you soon.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Amber.
Thank you, Amber. Thank you.
Jessica has a question. Do we have time? I think
Oh,
we do.
yeah, we have about 10 minutes.
Okay. Jessica?
Hi, everyone. Woo, this is like
Hi.
so much information and it's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom. My
welcome.
question is, and Wapio, you asked all of the great questions because those are all the ones that were on my mind. So that's great. But my ending question is kind of like, having learned about PMAs a few years ago and being completely overwhelmed and intimidated by all of it, I just kept putting in my mind, okay, one day I'm going to learn about it and then I'm going to get a PMA. And so my question is, should we have a PMA if we don't fully understand? If I couldn't speak in the way that you're speaking to defend myself and understand how it works, is that smart to still have a PMA as long as we understand just the basics and then potentially have people in our corner who could help us, right?
Yes.
Like, for example, yes. Okay, the answer is yes. That's what I
The answer is
feel.
yes. Yeah, the answer is yes. I didn't know much of this stuff either when I started mine 18 months ago. It's been working through it and you know, running things through my brain and really looking closely at my information and getting in contact with all of my people like Amber and the others that I work with. Yes, Dana, this could be you in 18 months. I still have a lot to learn. You know, I still shy away from looking at the tax code stuff because there's double speak in there and it's on purpose to keep stuff hidden from you. But it has been the most freeing and liberating thing I've ever done for my business and my family, to know that my children, who currently do have employers, but all have goals to work for themselves, that I can bring them in under my ministry. I have them read all of our PMA documents. They have to agree with everything that's in there, our bylaws and all of that. And if they don't agree with those, then I can help set up their own PMA.
Mhm.
You know, so, but doing this and helping to bring others in, other midwives in, I've always wanted to have a directory of PMA midwives.
Mm.
And this gives us an ability to have a directory of PMA midwives that's behind a membership wall. And we can even have the ability to bring in an NDA. Let's say, Jessica, that you have something happen in a birth and you want to debrief with someone, you can have them sign an NDA, which is a non-disclosure agreement that has a monetary value attached to it, say like $250,000 in gold coin has to be paid if they violate the NDA. So let's say you have this debriefing with them, both parties sign the NDA, and then the police pull them in to question them about their conversation with you. They get to say, with this legally binding document, there's an NDA in place. And if you want to speak to me, you have to pay the monetary stipulation there because I don't have it. You pay that and then I'll talk. Okay. This is the level I'm talking about. This sweet gentleman that I have been talking to, I'm just like, I want it. How do I share this? I think it's ingenious, and it speaks to what Wapio was talking about. We all have midwives in our communities that are more than happy to turn us in. You know, and they're first gonna May 1st approach you and being innocent with, well, I just want to understand what happened to you. And then boom, they're the ones that turn you in. Well, you have an NDA in place. Can you imagine receiving $250,000 in gold coin? I can help pay for your legal, you know?
Yeah.
So
I'm
here fighting for you guys. I really feel like this is the next step on my path, is to help bring midwives and turn us the other direction and help set a strong foundation for us so that we can serve our moms and their families the way that it was intended for us to serve them. So I'm glad that I've added value to all of you. I'm never sure, because sometimes this is some of the information can be so boring. Worth it. Okay.
I found this book fascinating, by the way. It's not really over your head. It's fascinating.
It's
And
very good.
Read it. They give you tips about things like, okay, if you're coming into your community as a non-licensed massage therapist, let's say, or a big one, a midwife, you know, and, you know, what do you do so that you do not inflame your community? I know that I would say, this is who I am. I'd write out this little thing. I'd send it to all the midwives, you know, and just say, I'm welcoming you to, ask me about my PMA. This might be right for you too. I know a midwife who has a PMA and her license. And if somebody asks her to do something like a vaginal breach, or something like that, twins, and her license doesn't allow it, well, she can use her PMA. So, this is a really good idea for nurse midwives, in case that way you can enlarge your practice or things like that. I think I would get in touch with my community and tell them who I am. And then the next thing, the other thing for me is I wouldn't have the slightest idea of a lawyer. I mean, we talked to get your lawyer. I don't have a lawyer. How do you find a lawyer? And is there a way to find a lawyer who is educated in PMAs? I know that there are lawyers who do nothing but draw them up for people, all right? But they don't necessarily go to court with you. That's not what they're offering. They're offering it to, do your PMA, but they're not your lawyer when the time comes, if you need one. So that's something I would like to explore too.
Yep. Well, and with the Nebraska midwife, as I shared with Wapio, they had no choice but to find her innocent. Right. Because they had to prove intent. And that's the thing for you to remember. Prosecutors have to prove that you had the intention of doing XYZ. You don't have to say anything. It's not your job to defend yourself. Okay. And like they like to teach us in TV shows and movies, it's not our job to defend ourselves. It's their job to prove their side of the case. And it's our job to prove that there's reasonable doubt of what they're saying.
Yeah. Well, all right, we are on time. So I want to say thank you, Angie, for coming and bringing Amber too. This, I feel like, has been very enlightening. And even for me, where I've, been talking about it for years and accruing information for people who have PMAs and whatnot, I learned a lot. And I think we all did. So thank you very much, all right, for coming.
You're welcome.
And thank you, all the people who are participating. At one point, there were a good 25, 30 people. So that's really great. Okay. And we do have the recording. All right. So let's close our circle unless there's anything else that needs to be said. So, all right. Goodbye. Good night. Until then, I come in peace. I offer peace. I come in friendship. I offer friendship. I hear you. I see you, I feel you, I cherish you. My wisdom comes from above and from under my feet, and I recognize and honor that in each of you. Let us work together. Namaste. Ashe, amen, alleluia, and adiosa, or with the gods. All right. See you soon.